Imagine a professional boxer stepping into the ring. He has trained for a decade. He knows every rhythm of the human body. He expects a jab from the left and a hook from the right. But suddenly, the world flips. His opponent moves in a mirror image. The angles are wrong. The timing is off. The predictable geometry of the fight has vanished. This is the Southpaw Advantage, and it is the first crack in a mystery that spans 5 million years of human evolution. Why is the world built for the right hand? Why is the left hand treated as a biological footnote? In every corner of the globe, across every culture, and through every era of recorded history, the ratio remains hauntingly consistent. 90% of us are right-handed. Only 10% are left-handed. This is not a random distribution. It is a biological monopoly. If you look at the animal kingdom, this asymmetry is almost non-existent. Chimpanzees, our closest relatives, are roughly 50-50. Cats and dogs show individual preferences, but as a population, they are balanced. Humans are the anomaly. We are the only species on Earth that has collectively decided to favor one side of the body over the other. This isn't just a quirk of behavior. It is a structural mandate written into our DNA and our brains. It influences how we build our cities, how we design our tools, and how we interact with the physical world. For the 10%, life is a constant negotiation with a world that wasn't made for them. They live in a landscape of right-handed scissors, gear shifts, and spiral notebooks. But this isn't just about the inconvenience of smudged ink. It is about a deep, evolutionary battle between cooperation and competition. It is a story of how our brains were forced to specialize to survive. The mystery of the 90% isn't just a question of biology. It is the ultimate investigation into the institutional power of the majority. To understand why the 90% rule exists, we have to look at the brain as a high-stakes corporate headquarters. Efficiency is the only metric that matters. The human brain is divided into two hemispheres, and they are not created equal. This is called lateralization. For the vast majority of people, the left hemisphere of the brain controls the right side of the body. But more importantly, the left hemisphere is also the primary seat of language and fine motor skills. This is the core problem. If the brain had to coordinate complex speech and complex tool use across both hemispheres simultaneously, the lag time would be devastating. Evolution hates lag. By concentrating language and motor control in one hemisphere, the left, the brain created a streamlined processing center. The result? A dominant right hand. This was the birth of the human monopoly. Archaeological evidence proves this isn't a modern phenomenon. We can look at ancient stone tools from 2 million years ago. By analyzing the flakes chipped away during the manufacturing process, researchers can determine if the maker was right or left-handed. The data is staggering. Even in the dawn of the Stone Age, the 90-10 split was already taking hold. We see it in cave paintings. Hand stencils on cave walls in France and Indonesia show a massive bias toward the left hand being used as the stencil, meaning the right hand was doing the work. This suggests that as soon as humans began to use tools and language, we began to pick a side. But if being right-handed is so efficient, why hasn't evolution simply wiped out the left-handers? Why does the 10% persist? If the system favors the 90, the 10 should have vanished long ago. This is where the fighting hypothesis enters the frame. In a world of physical confrontation, being a minority is a tactical superpower. In a fight, most people are used to facing right-handed opponents. They have a mental map of where the blows will come from. A left-handed fighter breaks that map. They provide a frequency-dependent advantage. Because left-handers are rare, they have more experience fighting right-handers than right-handers have fighting them. This isn't just theory. It's backed by violent data. Researchers have studied traditional, non-industrial societies and found a direct correlation between violence levels and the number of left-handers. In peaceful societies, the percentage of lefties drops. In societies with high homicide rates, the percentage of left-handers climbs. The left hand is the survivor's hand. It is the tactical glitch in the human matrix. This creates a biological stalemate. Cooperation pushes us toward being right-handed, so we can all use the same tools and share the same social space. Competition pushes us toward being left-handed, so we can maintain an edge in combat. The 10% is the evolutionary sweet spot. It is the point where the advantage of being a surprise is perfectly balanced against the disadvantage of living in a right-handed world. The institutional power of the 90% extends far beyond the battlefield. It has shaped our language, our religion, and our economy. For centuries, being left-handed wasn't just a physical trait, it was a moral failing. The word sinister comes from the Latin word for left. In contrast, the word dexterous comes from the Latin for right. To be right was to be skillful, holy, and correct. To be left was to be clumsy, untrustworthy, and perhaps even demonic. This wasn't just harmless superstition. It was a global campaign of suppression. In schools across Europe, Asia, and Africa, left-handed children were routinely beaten or had their left hands tied behind their backs. They were forced to conform to the right way of living. This institutional pressure was so intense that it actually suppressed the visible number of left-handers for decades. When the social stigma began to lift in the mid-20th century, the reported number of left-handers skyrocketed. They didn't suddenly appear. They were finally allowed to exist. But even without the threat of the cane, the economy of the right hand remains a heavy tax on the minority. Consider the left-handed wage gap. Some studies suggest that left-handers earn significantly less over their lifetimes than their right-handed counterparts. Why? It isn't a lack of intelligence. In fact, left-handers are often overrepresented in high IQ populations and creative fields. The gap likely comes from the environmental friction of a right-handed world. Every tool, from a simple pair of scissors to a complex piece of industrial machinery, is designed for the 90%. This creates a cumulative, micro-stress on the left-handed worker. They are constantly adapting, constantly translating, and constantly fighting against the physical logic of their environment. This friction leads to higher accident rates. Left-handers are statistically more likely to be injured by power tools or involved in car accidents. The world is quite literally dangerous for them. Yet, when we look at the highest levels of institutional power, the narrative shifts again. In the United States, a bizarrely high number of presidents have been left-handed. From Truman to Obama, the Southpaw has held the Oval Office at a rate far higher than 10%. Why? Some psychologists suggest that the struggle of being a left-hander in a right-handed world builds a specific kind of cognitive flexibility. To survive as a lefty, you must become biliterate. You have to understand the world's logic while maintaining your own. This creates a brain that is highly adapted to problem-solving and divergent thinking. They are the ultimate outsiders who have mastered the inside. This brings us to the sports monopoly. If you want to see the 90-10 split in its most raw, competitive form, look at the data from professional sports. In sports where there is no direct physical interaction, like golf or bowling, the percentage of left-handers stays near the 10% baseline. But as soon as you introduce interaction, or time pressure, the numbers explode. In Major League Baseball, nearly 25% of players are left-handed. In elite fencing, it can be as high as 40%. In professional tennis, the left-handed serve is the most feared weapon in the game. These athletes are the modern heirs to the fighting hypothesis. They are the living proof that being a minority is a strategic asset. The institution of professional sports has essentially subsidized left-handedness because the value of the surprise factor is worth millions of dollars in contracts and endorsements. A left-handed pitcher isn't just a player. He is a structural disruption to the opponent's strategy. The 90% dominance isn't just about hands. It's about the entire architecture of the human experience. We are an asymmetrical species, living in a symmetrical world. Our hearts are on the left. Our livers are on the right. Our brains are divided into specialized zones that don't mirror each other. This wasn't a biological coin flip. It was a calculated trade-off between the efficiency of the group and the survival of the individual. This is the single thread that connects the ancient stone toolmaker to the modern-day UFC fighter. Every time a left-handed person struggles with a can opener, they are feeling the weight of a 5 million-year-old social contract. That contract states that for the species to thrive, most of us must be the same. We must be predictable. We must use the same tools, follow the same patterns, and speak the same neurological language. The 90% provide the stability of the system. They are the infrastructure. They are the reason we can build skyscrapers and fly planes, because we can agree on how the controls should work. But the 10%? They are the system's insurance policy. They are the reminder that the right way isn't the only way. They provide the necessary chaos that prevents the human race from becoming too specialized. If we were 100% right-handed, we would be perfectly efficient, but we would be vulnerable. We would be a monoculture. The existence of the left-hander ensures that there is always a different perspective, a different angle of attack, and a different way of processing the world. The Southpaw is the evolutionary Plan B. They are the biological evidence that even in a world of overwhelming institutional power, there is a permanent, protected place for the outlier. This wasn't a series of biological accidents. It was the ultimate strategic compromise for a species that needed to speak and fight at the same time. We often think of evolution as a slow march toward perfection, but it is actually a messy negotiation between conflicting needs. We needed the left hemisphere of our brain to handle the massive processing load of human language. That requirement effectively claimed the right hand as its primary tool, but we also needed to survive the occasional ambush. We needed the glitch in the system to keep our enemies guessing. The 90% rule is the physical manifestation of that compromise. It is the balance between the social and the individual. Look at the way we design our world today. We are entering an era of inclusive design, where we try to accommodate every minority. We make left-handed mice, left-handed guitars, and left-handed desks. We are trying to erase the friction that has defined the left-handed experience for millennia. But in doing so, are we also erasing the very thing that made the 10% so successful? If the world becomes perfectly symmetrical, does the Southpaw Advantage disappear? If a left-handed child never has to adapt to a right-handed world, do they still develop that legendary cognitive flexibility? The institutional power of the 90% was a wall, but for the 10%, that wall was a training ground. It forced them to be better, faster, and more creative just to keep up. The story of handedness is the story of how we became human. It is the story of a brain that learned to divide and conquer its own functions. It is the story of a society that tried to beat the sinister out of its children, only to find that the sinister was exactly what it needed to win its wars and lead its nations. We are a species of 90% followers and 10% disruptors. This ratio is not a mistake. It is not a flaw in our design. It is the secret to our longevity. The next time you see someone struggling with a pair of scissors, don't just see a clumsy moment. See a 5 million-year-old survivor. See the person who, in a world of predictable right-handers, is the only one who can throw the punch you never saw coming. The 90% rule is the most successful monopoly in history. It is a monopoly that controls how we think, how we work, and how we die. It is a system that has lasted longer than any empire, any religion, or any government. And yet, it is a system that intentionally leaves the door open for the 10%. It is a kingdom that allows a small band of rebels to live within its borders. knowing that one day it might need their unique, mirrored perspective to survive a crisis it cannot see. We live in a world of right-handed clocks and right-handed doors. We live in a world of right-handed pens and right-handed laws. But the heartbeat of the species is found in the tension between the two. The 90% provide the rhythm. The 10% provide the syncopation. Together, they create the complex, asymmetrical music of human life. We are not a species of symmetry. So, we are a species of bias. And that bias is our greatest strength. It allowed us to develop language, to master tools, and to build a global civilization. But it also left a small, permanent space for the other. The left-hander is the living proof that the majority can never truly be absolute. There will always be a 10%. There will always be a mirror image. There will always be someone who sees the world from the other side. And in a world that is increasingly obsessed with conformity, that might be the most important lesson of all. The monopoly of the right hand is total, but it is not final. The silence of the archaeological record, the violence of the fighting hypothesis, and the strange statistics of the sports world all point to the same conclusion. We are designed to be unbalanced. We are built to be skewed. The 90% rule is the foundation of our social order, but the 10% is the spark of our individual genius. We are a species that has chosen a side, but we have never forgotten the power of the other hand. Imagine that boxer again. He is tired. He is beaten. He is facing a world that knows his every move. But then, he shifts his weight. He changes his stance. He leads with his right and strikes with his left. The world is caught off guard. The monopoly is broken. In that moment, the 10% isn't a minority. It is the only thing that matters. The world will always be built for the 90%. The scissors will always be wrong. The ink will always smudge. The tools will always be backwards. But the 10% will always be there, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the moment when the world needs a different angle. They are the biological reminder that the right way is just one way. The 90% rule is a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering. It is the perfect balance of cooperation and competition. It is the silence of the majority and the noise of the minority. It is the reason we are here today. And it is a system that will never change, because it is the system that makes us who we are. We are the 90%. We are the 10%. We are the human race, forever leaning to one side, yet never falling over. A world perfectly balanced is a world standing still,